I'll introduce Jaspal and the group, and then we'll get straight into Jaspal speaking a bit about his motivations, his schools, and the investment plan. And as I said, we'll then move to the Q&A at the end, which will be a bit more conversational and a bit more interactive. So this is the latest in a series of webinars that we've been running, and they concern opportunities and challenges in the education space and looking at general business growth during the pandemic times. We feel, and our partners feel, it's very important to have these conversations, particularly with regards to the relevance of education and how it needs to adapt to these shifting times. So the theme for today is obviously Schools of Tomorrow, Transforming Education. It's a unique opportunity to gain insights from Jaspal Sidhu, who's been democratizing the K-12 landscape by providing outstanding education at multiple price points across Indonesia. So really, truly education for all. So just a bit about Jaspal. He's a Singaporean, although we spent many years in Indonesia. He's the founder and chairman of the CIS Group of Schools and Inspirasi Schools. We'll get to that a bit later on. Jaspal has more than 25 years experience in the education space, having established quality schools across different geographies and emerging markets with multiple price points. Jaspal's experience includes forming strategic partnerships with reputed organizations, strategic players, home offices, impact funds, and private equity funds. He's led mergers and acquisition opportunities within his group and sits on the board of the Indonesian Education Forum, which is a public-private initiative. He also sits on several other international organizations. If you haven't seen already, Jaspal speaks very openly at international education conferences and webinars across the globe, from Cape Town, Dubai, Hong Kong, Singapore. Of course, it's all virtual now for the time being. A little bit about CIS. CIS is one of Indonesia's largest and most reputed chain of quality private K-12 schools with tuition fees at multiple price points. The group also has a presence in Myanmar, India, and South Korea. CIS is currently in a strategic partnership with the International Finance Corporation, part of the World Bank Group, to expand its operations in Indonesia, regionally and internationally. In 2009, CIS Group of Schools was awarded the prestigious Financial Times IFC Global Education Award for its transformational work in education across multiple price points and geographies. Recognition of outstanding achievement that's still ongoing. Jaspal's got a new passion, which you're going to hear about, which is Inspirasi Schools. These schools are focused on providing quality education in the middle to lower half of the income level pyramid. Inspirasi is currently looking at expanding these schools in Indonesia, Philippines, India, and Africa. Jaspal is a graduate from National University of Singapore. He's an engineer. We won't hold that against him. He's also got his MBA from the University of Hull. And interestingly enough, for those of you that don't know, he's the Indonesian 3-time amateur stand-up comedian champion. There you go, in a nutshell, Jaspal. So I think it's a good jumping off point, Jaspal, and just by way of introduction, to look at perhaps initially your motivations. I know you're an engineer, as I said, but can you walk us through what made you establish the CIS Group and how you did it, and what are your personal goals?
Well, first of all, thank you, Oliver, and thank you to Ask Consulting for this privilege to be sharing my thoughts on this in these very strange and challenging times for families, loved ones, and for businesses. I hope wherever you are, you're sitting healthy and you have a smile on your face. So a very warm welcome from me in Singapore. I know I have friends listening in from Europe, somewhere in Europe, from Japan. I see some familiar faces from Africa, Indonesia, and elsewhere. So let me say, I have no plans today to waste your time with a marketing pitch. A lot of what you want to know about SIS and Inspirasi is on our websites. What I will do today is I will be blunt, as I always am, and I want to share because I sincerely feel we need to collaborate. We really need to work together and try to change this angry and very sick world that we are in. And schools are the answers. But first, let me start by saying that I am driven by one thing and one thing alone in the education sector, which is to provide quality education to different income levels in an impactful, scalable, and sustainable manner. So where did this passion come from, you may ask? I'm a Singaporean engineer who's worked throughout Indonesia. And this year marks 25 years of my experience in Indonesia. I speak the language fluently. Jadi kepada teman-teman, rekan-rekan yang lagi ikut dari daerah, dari di mana, semoga Bapak-Bapak dan Ibu ada di keadaan yang sehat dan walafiat. I have great respect for the Indonesian people, and I know the country well. Now, many of you don't know this. I did not come from a rich family, a well-to-do family. I'm a son of a humble doorman, a satpam in Indonesia, someone who stood in front of a bank and just opened doors to let people in all day, but he sacrificed his life to educate 3 of us. So I know what education means to the aspirational class. So this is where my passion comes from. So now let's talk about the SIS journey. But before that, let me show you something about Indonesia. It's the largest economy in Southeast Asia. It's the 4th largest country in the world. Digital savvy, passionate people. To investors who are listening in, if you want to be in Southeast Asia, you want to be in Indonesia. According to the World Bank latest report, Indonesia is now officially an upper middle income country. There is a growing aspirational class in Indonesia, and please don't forget that. I know there are edtech companies listening in as well. But hang on. Amidst all this, there is a weak education system. In fact, if you look at the bottom right-hand corner, Indonesia is at the bottom 1/5 of these OECD rankings through what you call the PISA test, which stands for Program for International Student Assessment. This is where they do random, you see it on the top right-hand corner, where they have 15-year-olds randomly selected and they test you on math, science, and reading, and the application of your knowledge. But look at who is number 1. Singapore. Why? And it's been there for a long time. If it's not number 1, it's number 2. Because the island has no resources. There are only people, and lots of them. So the R&D in education in Singapore is phenomenal. And I know that because I'm well plugged into the system. And Indonesia's education problem hasn't improved over the last 10 years. While enrollment has gone up, and I say kudos to President Jokowi and the previous presidents, while enrollment has gone up, unfortunately, student outcomes has not. And a lot of this has to do with the pedagogy and teachers. So with that background and this setting, you will probably understand why I did what I did. Way back in 1996, the most expensive school in Indonesia was at $28,000 per year per child. It's a great campus, wonderful facilities, wonderful teachers. But how many people can afford this school? So therein lies the opportunity, therein lies where my passion was put into. I embarked on what you call a half fees project. Basically, each time when I established a private school, I just halved the fees. And I created an ecosystem where schools will collaborate vertically. The key word is vertically, up and down the tuition fee ladder. So I halved that, and I did a school at $14,000, and in South Jakarta, the capital. And then I halved that to $7,000. I did several schools in Northeast and West Jakarta. And I was asked to do more of these schools, but can a doorman's son afford a $7,000 school? The answer is no. So I halved that to $4,000, and I set up several schools in other parts of Indonesia. And very recently, I halved that to $2,000, and we did some schools in South Sumatra. And we did that very systematically and very, very carefully. So today we are expanding in this region, that section you see at the top, the SIS brand. We are also expanding outside Indonesia, in Myanmar, in India, in Korea. And I've got friends in Africa that I'm actually talking to and working to bring SIS there. But our next expansion plan is actually this, the Inspirasi School, this market that is below or with at that $2,000 price point. This is a huge base, a huge base. And I will talk more about the school later. So we are in a strategic partnership with the IFC and the World Bank, who helps us in an expansion plan. That is our biggest strength, our network of schools. And I'll talk a little bit more about this later. A network that allows sharing and collaboration with a great team. Quickly, we use 3 of the world's best curriculum. As you saw, Singapore is #1. We use Cambridge, we use the IB. Kids are out of the class, they're learning journeys, they're projects, of course, sports and creative arts are important. Very important, we also have what you call the PACE initiative, which are skills that we develop for the 21st century for a very unpredictable world: perseverance, analytical thinking, collaboration, and entrepreneurship. So how have these kids done? Well, suffice to say that I can talk a lot about them, but they've gone to great universities in the world. And you know what? Some at low price points. And that is something that I am very proud of. And last year, we were awarded the Global Financial Times IFC World Bank Award that Oliver mentioned. And it validates the work that we have been doing the last 15, 20 years. And the theory is this. And if you're a single school operator, you will want to listen to this. If you are a group with at least 3 schools, you will want to listen to this. Make your schools collaborate. Because if you don't, they are pedagogically isolated. And that is the reason why a lot of public schools struggle, because they are pedagogically isolated. And I narrate a lot of these stories across the world when I have the opportunity to share, from Cape Town to Dubai. I'm not an NGO, ladies and gentlemen, if you're listening in. I am not an NGO. I have investors, good investors currently, and every investor, every partner, my stakeholders have always been happy. Oliver asked me about my personal goals. I have 5. Number 1, wherever we go, wherever we establish schools, we have to have meaningful public-private partnerships. I know there are some great schools listening in. It is our duty to help improve the neighborhood public schools. Number 2, I have investors. I'm raising funds. My schools need to be sustainable, scalable. And that one word, impactful, is equally important. We all have to decide in our own minds, what is this impact that we are trying to create? We need to keep innovating our programs. This is an unpredictable world. Our kids are not going to have jobs. So is your program live? So this keeps me up. This keeps my team up. We're also looking to identify and train passionate educators. And here, I know I have friends from Deloitte listening, and I'm working with Deloitte to find innovative ways to train teachers. And you know what? Some of you are educators, you may not be happy, but I'll say this again. The solution to a lot of the problems in education lies outside the education industry. I'm interested to see how Google and Apple and Starbucks, how do they hire and train? What can we learn from them? And lastly, share and learn. There's so much for me to learn from all of you. Well, that, Oliver, are my 5 goals, and a 2-minute or a 3-minute sum up as to what I do and why I do it.
Yeah, thanks. That's crucial, I think, to start at the motivation and understand why you do what you're doing and the impact that has in terms of development of human capital and social mobility, but also reaching scale, which comes to my next point for your investors as well. So as part of that, Jasper, you managed to reduce tuition fees from, I think it said 15,000 US a year right down to about 2,000 US a year. And you still manage to maintain the quality of your schools. So of course, the question is, what's the secret?
Yeah, so I'll be blunt and I'll be open and I'll share. You see, when you reduce fees in any school, two things happen. Number one, infrastructure starts reducing. That big swimming pool, that big multi-purpose hall starts going away. Number two, your teacher cost needs to come down. And let's talk about teachers, because infrastructure you can do through leasing, you can do through many JVs, but the key here is teachers. Now, to bring teacher costs down, you have to hire from local communities and not expatriates, local communities, and therein lies the problem. Teachers from, and remember, I've been throughout Indonesia, from Palembang to Lombok to Aceh. In fact, I spent a year in Aceh. Teachers from local communities, Oliver, they have passion, but they lack the exposure to international best practices. So these schools at the bottom of the tuition fee pyramid suffer from what I just said before, which is pedagogical. Did I lose the screen?
Yeah.
Suffer from what I said. Hang on, let me.
Yeah, take your time. No, you're back.
Okay. They suffer from what I say before is pedagogical isolation. You know why? Because schools at the bottom of the pyramid, who else can they collaborate with? With the next budget school. And what do you have? You have what I call flat ideas. And that's the reason why a lot of the public schools are not doing well, and a lot of schools at the bottom of the pyramid. So what we do, we allow them to collaborate vertically upwards. And remember the award that I mentioned, the Financial Times? That's the reason why we want it. It's a vertical collaboration, allowing our teachers, our community to collaborate up and down the tuition fee ladder. So our principals, they all interact. My $2,000 principal, I'm sure she's listening in, she chairs the meeting like the United Nations. She chairs the meeting and everyone listens to her. She's not the stepsister of the whole group. And she expresses what she needs, what she wants, and she shares. And our administrators do it, our students do it. So that network that I spoke, see, you need to be part of a network. So the network I spoke about results in this strength, and no school is operating in isolation. That's the key, Oliver.
Yep. Yeah, good. Massive gains from operating as a group, and obviously I think what resonates there is the idea of having parity of voice and agency, regardless of which price point your schools are operating.
Correct.
So, Inspirasi, you've mentioned it. More about this. What's it all about?
So let's again talk about the market. So you see those blue and orange lines? Those orange arrows are where SIS schools are currently. The blue arrows point to where SIS schools will be. Well, we were about to start in some of these projects, but the pandemic has kind of threw a span in the wheel, but this is where we will be in the next 2, maybe 3 years. But you know what this map shows? It shows you that we are in 7, maybe 8 of the biggest cities. And beyond this, Oliver, the price doesn't taper down, it dives down. And Indonesia has more than 120 cities. It's price sensitive. What else? Where are these people going to school? What price can they afford? And because we understood the intricacies of creating such schools, of halving fees, Inspirasi will be popping up in all these cities. And that's what we are looking at. And we've done studies. These are the cities that can take such a school. And this is This is the market that we're actually looking at, and they'll be all scalable, they'll be impactful. I'll talk about that later. Now, that's the plan, right? And for listeners, it's not me flexing muscle to say, oh, look where we are going. It's for you to understand the price sensitive nature of the country. That if you think that you want to expand, you need to figure out what your price point is. And frankly, out of those 7, 8 cities, its prices come down very quickly. So what is this Inspirasi value proposition? And if you're an investor or a grant writer, or if you are a friend listening in, when you look at schools, let me keep it simple. Look at what I call the 3 Ps of a school. People, program, place. You don't have to look at many other things. People, program, place. So in terms of people, the Inspirasi schools will be hiring great local teachers from the communities. And they will be what, I wrote a paper on my LinkedIn, it's called the Effector, where the teachers will be earnest, they'll be funny. And I'm telling you, if your teachers are not funny, remember the comedian story, if your teachers are not funny, no one's gonna listen. In fact, there is a way to train yourself to be funny. I mean it. Go to Steve Martin's online course and you put your teachers through that. They got to be firm. They got to be enthusiastic, consistent, being on time, open-minded, and researcher. The P for program, this is a school that will look at bilingualism, technology, blended learning. It'll be project-based, 21st century skill. And what I'm really proud of, this is a school that will focus on the climate, on the environment. The pandemic, it's given a kick on our bottom. Our kids need to be sensitized, and that aspirational market, that mass market needs to focus on this. So a school will be looking at these. And finally, place, Inspirasi will be a post-pandemic design school. I'm talking to architects. I've learned so much of the clever use of space for collaboration without overcrowding. We're looking at international architects giving us ideas. So it will be actually a post-pandemic education institution that will be a game changer in Indonesia. And over here, I know I have my partners, Tandip and my friends from Altrui, a family office of a great businessman. So we are working with them to expand the school throughout Indonesia. So that, I hope, Oliver, gives you a bit of an insight into what Inspirasi is all about.
Absolutely. I mean, I think we could have a separate long session about that, just on Inspirasi itself. Everything bodes well, as you know, Jaspal. The fundamentals remain the same. What is going to be interesting, there are a number of K-12 groups who've tried to tap that market before, some successfully, some less so. So it's going to be really interesting how you guys can do that, replicate your success in SIS in Inspirasi.
I think
sorry,
thanks, Oliver. I think the knowledge that we brought from the schools on the upper end is going to be super important coming downwards. And you see the P for program, have a look at that. A lot of international schools also say that. In fact, they all talk about this. So let me ask everybody, do you think schools down the tuition fee ladder should be void of this? This is a program that should be in hands of everybody. And if you tell me Indonesian teachers can't do it, I'm going to laugh. Because I've seen great passion in Indonesian teachers. The only problem is they are not exposed to best practices. And that's what we all need to do. Thanks, Oliver. I get very emotional when I talk.
Yeah, no, we'll round back to that one. We'll round back to that one, definitely. So let's get clipping along. I want to get into the B for this, Jaspal, which is the investment, because quite frankly, you wouldn't be where you are now without appropriate funding partners. So, investment in education. At which point in your journey do you think, or other schools rather, do you think schools should explore outside investments and perhaps reflect a bit more on your decision-making process in this regard?
Okay, so let's move away from SIS Inspirasi. That's a great question, right? So everybody, whether you're one school group or a 3 school group or a 11 school group like us and growing, everybody feels and they want an investment so then expand, so that they can expand. And the question is, when do you start thinking about this? I think the first thing when you are looking for an investment, you have to have in your mind, why are you doing it? Why are you looking for this investment? Are you exiting? Are you expanding? For us, it was simple. I wasn't exiting. I love what I do. I wake up every day smiling. You know, I want to see SIS and Inspirasi and work with all the other school operators out there. So, but what I needed was capital. What I needed was a network. And frankly, I also needed a diversity in experience. I have today some wonderful board members who bring experience from Sri Lanka, from UK, from Malaysia that share with us. So be very clear why you are raising the investments. Once you get that sorted out, the next thing you need to look at is your brand, right? Don't get too excited when you see your enrollment go up and you say, oh, we need to expand. Does the market trust your brand? Can you continue to deliver? Remember, expansion also means consistency of delivery. Can you deliver your teaching and learning in a consistent manner? Now, under brand reputation, we can talk about this all day, but I just, for the listeners, and I know there are some school operators, I want to bring your mind to these 3 points. One is consistency. You know, I've gone to a lot of schools, I picked up their brochure, holistic, 21st century, personalized learning, highly trained teachers, state of the art, but you don't see any of this. These are brochure talk. So make sure that whatever you say is obvious and you can deliver it in a very consistent manner, because once you cut across different cities, you'll be under a lot of pressure on delivery. So how do we do it? In our group, we have a umbrella management group with very qualified people. It's as big as 20, 25 people with a diversity of experience. And they're sharing, they're looking, and we're looking at consistency, including how our logo should look like and how should we place. And I want to see consistency across SIS and Inspirasi schools. Number 2 is feedback. Look, let's not kid ourselves. Schools hate feedback. Board members don't like feedback. Teachers don't like feedback. They say they like feedback, but they don't. And if you say, no, we like, listen, when some of you are parents, when your child comes to you and say, Mom, Dad, I hate my math teacher, we all panic, right? Because there's 11 months or 10 months of rubbish math. Now, what do? You want to go and talk to the teacher, and your son or your daughter say, Mom, please don't go. So what do? You start talking to other parents. Hey, what do you think of this teacher? And you start forming gangs, and then you go and see the principal, and the principal become defensive. That's the problem in schools. If you're in a restaurant, you don't like the Kentucky Fried Chicken, you won't come there tomorrow. But unfortunately, this poor child who hates math or doesn't like the math teacher has to come back to school again and again and again for 10 months. So you need to have a feedback system to pick up these things. So in SIS, we have 4 different feedback loops. Number 1, our parents give feedback on the school. Number 2, our teachers give feedback on their principals anonymously. Because we Asians are so scared to say things about our principal, we just suffer in silence. So we get to see this. I want to know, do I have a Hitler running a school up in Kalimantan or what have you? Number 3, our students. Here it is. Our students give feedback on teachers. I'm proud to say my secondary 1 boys and soon my primary 6, they actually give feedback on teachers. And 4, management gives feedback on people like me. Brand integrity. Now this is tricky. And kepada teman-teman di Indonesia, saya minta maaf ya sebelum saya ngomong ini. To my friends in Indonesia, I'll be apologetic, but I'll say this anyway. Keep in mind, I think I have the right to say this. I've been in Indonesia for 25 years. The problem in a lot of businesses in countries like Indonesia is ownership is intertwined with management and contractors and vendors. What do I mean by that? There's a school. The brother is supplying the furniture. The mother is in the canteen. The grandfather is the contractor. The wife is a teacher. Look, when you take money from investors and you start doing these sort of thing, investors are going to turn away. That's not good. So we are probably, and I put a bet with someone, we are probably the only school in this part of the world that has a whistleblowing policy. Now, if you don't know what a whistleblowing policy is, if you think, if anyone within SIS feels or thinks there's some sort of nepotism or corruption, there's an independent number that they can call. An independent number. And it triggers a lot of investigations, and board will get to know, and I will get to know. If it's me, other people will find out. So that's very important for investors. Now, keep in mind, because you have invited investors to your house, you need to deliver. You need to be open, you need to be fair. Very quickly, the other 2 points, Oliver, is policies and systems. They have to be in place. Sort your kitchen out before you ask investors to come and see. You know, please, this is where consultants come into play. It'll be a big mistake to let someone walk into your kitchen and looks like you're cooking something strange. And finally, make sure you have a solid management team in place. I'll talk a little bit about this later. If it's not solid, you need to change it. It doesn't matter if it's your brother, sister, uncle, or auntie. If they're not solid, you're bringing investors, yeah, give them some sort of commissaries or some advisor role and get them out. Because when your investors come in, there'll be a tension. That was as blunt as it could get, Oliver.
Yeah, that's spot on. I'm sure this is resonating with absolutely everyone who's got anything to do with education at the moment. So a quick heads up. We got a lot of questions coming through privately and in the chat room. Please keep them coming. We want to address as many as we can. Jaspal has very kindly set aside some time for this. So I anticipate we're probably going to be overrunning here. So if anyone's got time, please stay on the webinar, and we'll take as much time as we need.
I'll try to speed up my stories.
No, please don't. It's fantastic. So I think, you know, the next burning question, Jaspal, that school owners and operators out there are going to ask. Okay, I know when I need to look for investment, but without going down the rabbit hole, what are the different investment models out there? And perhaps, you know, which ones did you choose and why would be a good place to start?
Okay, there are generally four models: the franchise model, the management, the equity debt, and the mergers and acquisition. I'll move very quickly. You know, the franchise model in K-12, I hate that. I think, I don't think sorry if there are listeners out there who have franchise K-12. I think you can franchise K, but K-12 is very tricky. I don't like it, because K-12 is about delivering curriculum in a very innovative, very way where you're developing a child's emotions, his physical development, his moral values, and to say, here's a document, please follow this, your child's emotional and development will take place, don't worry about it. And by the way, give me those franchise fees. I don't like that. So I never go down the franchise model. The management model is something that I like. This is where you own the school owner owns the P&L, and we have models like this in Myanmar, where we get involved all the way from designing a school. Someone has come to us to help him build a school somewhere in Indonesia. We work with them from designing 18 to 24 months. We work with them to position the brand. We hire teachers, we train them. And this is my favorite model for geographies like Africa and Korea. I've got a fund in Africa, a good friend of mine listening in. So this is the structure we will go, with an option to take an equity once we get familiar with the terrain. The third is the equity and debt model. That's quite straightforward. For us, the debt came from the IFC, World Bank, a lot of it. And the equity came from myself and my partners. What I want to say about that structure is we are a very asset-light enterprise. And here's a problem in K-12, right? Everyone, now if you have deep pockets, you can go buy land and building. We don't. Because once you sink money into land and building, you are down $10 million, and schools take 3 to 4 years to give you some sort of a positive EBITDA. And if you don't get the enrollment, what's the first thing they do? They start cutting teachers. They start cutting quality. Why? Because it's invested in land and building. We are not land and building speculators. I'm not a conglomerate. I'm not a rich man. I don't own a bank. I am a school operator. So what does that mean? It means we have to ensure standards all the time. We live and die on our tuition fees. And therefore, feedback and all that systems become very important. The last one is mergers and acquisitions. That's something that we were exploring before the pandemic, and I think we will explore down the line with help like companies like yours, Oliver Ask Consulting, where we will look at M&A. But this one, you need dry powder, right? And two things to think about when you look at M&A. Ask yourself, I know why the investor is doing it, because he wants to plug in that school very quickly for those numbers. But ask yourself, why are you doing it? Because ultimately you will be operating the school. What's the value add? Is that heavy lifting? I know the numbers are good, but is it going to suck out your management time? So these are the things that you need to look at. Yep.
Yep. Yeah. Again, super interesting. And again, it warrants a separate session, particularly about the models for organic and inorganic growth, and perhaps the need for patient capital from your investors there. But moving on, I mean, as we mentioned in the beginning, Jasper, you've dealt with a number of PEs, you've dealt with family offices, you've dealt with development banks and commercial banks. What type of partners were you initially looking for, and how did this profile change over time, if at all?
So look, I had my share of good and bad partners. The good ones are listening in. The bad ones I didn't send the Zoom link to. But look, the partners that I pick and have picked have all become like friends. They're like family. I can talk to them over dinner. I can sit and chat. They all have a heart. This is education. You need a partner who understands that this is a long-term business. This is not short-term. So 2 things. Number one, confirm, as we Indonesians say, Singaporeans say, double confirm why exactly he is your partner. Is it just money? If it's money, be careful. If it's someone who wants to be there for your journey and understands what the pain points are, he's the right one. Number 2, due diligence. Please, 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 please. People can hide passion, but they can't hide reputation. You need to do your due diligence. You need to know where the sources of money coming from. So I won't go down as to why I pick bad partners or in the past, but I think I've learned a lot. So just these 2 things. I think in one case, I didn't do my due diligence well, Oliver. I got too excited too quickly, and I think I paid the price for it. But well, it's okay. You got war wounds now.
Yeah, exactly. You've learned to fight another battle, and in some way, it obviously helped reaffirm your position and grow your brand. So looking at it from the other angle, from the investor side, Jasper, you just segued nicely into this one. What are investors looking for, and what kind of value add can operators look to see them bring into the deal?
Okay, so again, you have several kinds of investors, right? Strategic groups that want to grow their group, or you have short-term investors, you have private equity, family offices are long, but generally investors want returns, okay? And you can't fault them. You ask them to put money in and say, please leave that money for 15 years, ain't nobody gonna do that, right? They want returns, so that means they want a growth. But no investor, and I'm quite confident, will buy 1 school or maybe 2 schools and then sit on it, unless you're a rich man with spare money. If you're talking about genuine funds, they are not going to buy 1 school and sit on it. They're going to create platforms. And I want to quickly talk about this. Now, so what are these platforms? A platform is where you start buying schools and just putting it all into one big entity. And there are a lot of benefits for this when you look at a platform. The transaction is easier. There is far more control because there's a single entity at the top. It could be in a reliable jurisdiction. It could be in Singapore, so the laws are governing that. It could be efficient cash and asset management. That's economies of scale. So we all know why the investor wants to do it, and the investor will tell you, and you got excited. But hey, school operators, hati-hati, yep, be careful, because you need to align the vision. And very quickly, investors, and I know some investors are listening in, they tend to overpromise as to what they can do. Because pacaran, right? They want to win you over. So they'll say, hey, you know, we'll bring in the money. We will advise you on branding. We'll bring in the education expectations. We can do this for you. So there's this high expectation. And when they can't deliver, cracks start to form. Number two, when an investor invests in your company, he's going to inherit management. Now, when he inherits management, I want you to remember this. If they don't like certain people, they're going to push you to get rid of them. So it could be your father, uncle, auntie, mother. Clean up your management team. And that's where the cracks will occur. Sometimes if it's a majority holder, he will say, I don't like the founder. I think you're old. I don't think you have a vision. Why don't you just be an advisor? Make sure you clear all these. Second is growth to acquisition. Investors want quick growth. So they look at a lot of M&A. Operators, we like our brand. We want to grow new schools. So it's greenfields. It takes time. And lastly, second last point, investors look at bottom line. Operators always look at the people and product. And I'm not saying that investors, I'm sorry if there's some investors out there who disagree. I'm not saying that that's the only thing that they'll look at, but I'll say that's heavy because they need to get out and keep that in mind. And lastly, investors also look at exit and operators look for patient money. And that's something you all need. So please align your vision. Don't get too excited. My message to investors is just this. Please don't overpromise. Just tell us what can be done or cannot. In terms of operators, please don't get excited because he's coming to your house. We all need to behave.
Yeah, and I think if there's one slide that school owners and investors can take from today, this is probably it, Jaspal, and your key learnings from it. Some of the synergies and some of the inherent tensions as well.
I have a 1 hour lecture on this.
You're booked for the next one. So the next issue, the red hot issue that we always get from school owners is perhaps one that you're in the best position to answer because you've done it so many times, Jasper. But can you share about the process of sourcing and securing investment?
Yeah, it's not too complicated, but from our perspective, number one, I would divide it as the internal process and the external. Internally, please get your kitchen right? And your kitchen includes what is your value proposition? How good is your team? Don't use anecdotal stories to defend your standards. There needs to be data. Are your facilities on par, or is your building looking like it's so tired? Systems, policies, are your financial audits, are your legal licenses, your contracts, do they meet standards? Or are you underpaying your staff? And the last one, today's investors, they're all looking at ESGs, environmental and social governance. If you don't have an ESG plan, I don't think you're going to get a great investor. Do some research on what that is. And then you move into what you call the business plan. And it's important because when you look at a business plan, the 3-year historicals is going to give you, because you created this, an idea of how great you are. So don't go standing up and say that you are great, but your trends at the back shows a wonky performance. Go look at that, find out the reason, and then start talking and flexing muscles. Do your sensitivity analysis. You know what? Pandemic, next 3 years, up and down, schools open, schools shut, enrollment doesn't grow. What happens? And then have a clear idea of expansion. You want investors' money, explain to them what are your plans. What have you done? Where are you going to put your school? Those maps that I showed you where I'm putting my Inspirasi school, we paid a lot of money to get a consultant to help me work out those structure. And externally, You build your list, you get a consultant to help you. Then there's the romance, you go have, pacaran, have dinner, have lunch, have what have you, you hug each other, you do your due diligence, you run the process, and then the final is the marriage. And get some good people to back you up to run this process. Because you got a business to run. A lot of people, when they start doing this, they forget that they have a business to run, and that you find enrollment going down.
I think, yeah, thank you for sharing. Again, it's gold. It's probably fairy dust for school operators, Jaspal. They really need to know this if they want to command decent multiples on any kind of transaction that they do. So, clipping along, you mentioned due diligence there. So, how ready were you for financial and legal due diligence processes? And perhaps in hindsight, what would you have done differently? Or could a school owner do to prepare themselves for this process?
1 minute answer to this. I'm an engineer, so it really augured well. Data was very important. So I had systems in place. It's in my DNA to collect data and analyze. So we had a great framework. Number two, my partnership with IFC World Bank was gold, because I was exposed immediately to international best practices. So we put those systems in place. So my FDD, my financial due diligence, and my legal due diligence processes were not difficult. It will be difficult when you do it the first time around, but I've raised funds several times and it gets easier. On hindsight, what would I have done better? I think some of this I would have got a consultant to do it. I wouldn't have done it myself. It's stressful, and sometimes my eye went off my own business. So I hope that makes sense.
No, definitely, and it's again, it echoes what we experience from a number of school operators out there. It's the burden of due diligence can really undermine the school operations if it isn't addressed as you mentioned there. So the last question before we wrap this up and shoot the Q&A out to the audience there, and it's the real beef. I guess it's the bones that the beef is on. Can you shed any light on the process of negotiation? What were the critical areas, and how did your team handle it?
So I've done this a few times. So to school operators, let me just say this. Never, ever start with valuations. If you start looking at valuations, you are on the wrong track. Always start with forming a common vision between you and your investors. That's a very good place to start. Always start with forming a common vision. Why? Because as you explore the vision, you will begin to see what's in the heart of the investor. You got to explore where your school will be in 3 years, where you will be in 5 years. That's more important. Now, when you have done your business plan properly, remember I said to you, your valuation will stare you in your face. Don't imagine things that don't exist. If you got a bad 3-year historical, don't go and stand there and say, oh, I think I'm worth so much. Really? Go look at your trends. And on valuations, one of the biggest problem in K-12 is the land and building, Oliver. Okay? If a business makes an EBITDA of, say, $1 million and an offer is made, I've heard 1,000,000 times where the owner says to me, but my land and building is worth $20 million. I can put a condominium here. And my answer is, go ahead and put a condominium, because I am not buying the land and building, right? And that's why a lot of Indonesian transactions don't happen, because of land and building. So how do you solve this? I tell people this. You need a good home for your school. We are prepared to cut a deal. We are prepared to take you on board. I'm prepared to grow your school. But I don't want your land and building because it's too expensive. I am not a land speculator. So give me a long lease. Let's adjust the financials and let's cut a deal. And I have people who actually work with me along those lines. So that's the biggest hurdle.
Yep. Agree, and of course it's and I think one of the big learnings from that is to perhaps, when you look at any kind of investment in your business, is to perhaps park the asset the land and building as perhaps even a separate business unit and look at different options there. Yeah. So sorry, there is one more. There is one more question.
Oh, go ahead. Let's switch to the questions, and then
look, I got this one for you, and it's kind of rounds out everything that you said. I'm not sure you're going to be able to do it in the next couple of minutes, but just top tips for school owners looking for investment or divestment. What can you share with us, Jasper?
Yeah, you know, again, I've got like a 1-hour chat on this, but I'm just going to summarize this very, very quickly. My final top tips are these, right? Number one, let's talk about divestments first. Who divests? People who are tired, people who want the school to be handed over to a group. So when you look at divestments, what I want you to think about is this. It's your baby. Look for a school group that you can pass this school to, because they deserve it. That child that came to your school wants to be in a growing, flourishing school. Don't sell and take your money and run away. You have to leave the legacy behind. So here, if I can make my pitch, I said I won't make a marketing pitch. We are in an acquisition mode. I'm very happy to talk to school groups, whether you're one group or two schools, because I'm a founder. I know how you feel. And in my transactions, I protect the founder and his legacy. Now, if you're looking at investments, my tips, I've got, I think, 5 tips or 6 tips. Number one, please, if you're looking for investment, I said this before, make sure your systems and policies are in place. 2, make sure you have feedback systems. Your investor needs to know at all times what is happening in your business. So I have concrete feedback loops that he can actually have confidence in. Thirdly, please, 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 if you have relatives, uncles, aunties, mothers, fathers, neighbors involved in your business, please clean it up if you want an investor, because they don't like this. They don't like incestuous relationship, nor do I. And I can tell you, my wife's a teacher. She has never stepped into my school, maybe twice, to ask me to go home. But I don't get families involved. But it's okay. You can get family involved. I'm not saying don't get family involved, but subject them to the same accountability as the other person. Now, you need investors who understand education, because this is a long-term business. You need investors who are patient and they have experience. Please don't go to investors who have no experience in education. It will be a miserable, especially those who want quick returns. This one is important. Remember, you opened the door, you stood up, you told that story, you said how great you were. So please be honest and fair to your investors. Take care of them. I've got people listening in. I can tell you, hand on heart, every investor who has come in SIS and left SIS have left smiling, and they've become my friends. And my burden, when someone invests in SIS, I find it hard to sleep. I don't know. I carry the burden of people's investment. Maybe it's my father's DNA and doorman, Satpam legacy, but that's what we do. And finally, please, you see that? Conflict. This is not a manufacturing company. If you are in conflict, you have to solve this quickly. There are children with dreams and hopes in your school who are oblivious of any commercial deals and disagreements. They must not suffer. There must be no reason for you to threaten an investor to say, you know what, I'm going to shut the school. You know what, I'm going to block you from coming into this country. There should be no reason. This is a school. Thank you, Oliver.
Great, fantastic. We are reaching the cutoff time, and some people probably do have to go. So just to let you know, we'll be making this recording available on our YouTube channel, and we'll share the link with everyone. But hopefully Jaspal can stay on for just 10 more minutes, because we've got everyone's input together and distilled it into just 5 questions here, and some might be a bit shorter than others, but in no particular order. And this is something that a lot of investors get cold feet over about investing in Indonesia, and and some of them never reach a level of comfort with this. But the regulatory landscape and government policy, Jaspal, in Indonesia, how to look at it? Is it an enabler or a constraint?
I think it's people who are familiar in investments in India, where things are a yayasan structure, a trust structure. They understand how this business. People who are not familiar in structures like this, I've had investors who couldn't understand the yayasan structure and walked away. But I had investors who have transacted across multiple geographies and looked at, for India, for example, it's very familiar, like Indonesia, they have the trust structure, so they understand. But I'm hoping that the Indonesian government will make it easier for investors to invest in K-12. And that yayasan structure, that needs to be adjusted. And rumors has it there's some talk going on in that direction, but I don't know. So I'm actually putting up a white paper, and I would urge all school operators to also participate and join us and put some input into the government to look at a different structure.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, let's move on. How has the COVID-19 situation affected your expansion plan?
It's all delayed. I mean, 2020 doesn't exist. As far as I'm concerned, this is a nightmare. It's about managing your current enrollment. It's about ensuring the parents are happy with online teaching. So any new greenfield schools have all been postponed by a year. But here's the good news. The pandemic has shown that people want their children back in school, right? So we are in the right sector. K-12 is the best sector to be in. So keep your chin up, ensure your enrollment is strong, or at least managed and maintained, and you will see a pickup. Just make sure your online teaching runs well, and be prepared for a open and shut situation. Somehow in my heart, I think when we are going to open, we're going to have a Korea type situation. I hope not, okay? But be ready for an open and shut type situation.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, as we mentioned earlier, the fundamentals of K-12 and private education, particularly in Indonesia, remain the same. So there is hope for optimism. It's just a matter of when the rebound will be and what that rebound will look like. The next question is actually related to that. It's super interesting and probably requires a bit of a candid response from you. I'm going to read it verbatim. Most private schools in Indonesia, at least the good quality ones, are running less than 100% occupancy. Can we say that the current supply is still enough? And how long does it take for schools since establishment to get up to 80–90% occupancy? So the first part is your occupancy rates, and the second part is the gestation period for greenfields.
So it all has to do with the power of your brand. Okay, two things. Schools are first mover. If you are the first one there, and the next school is about 2 hours away, and there is a community around there, you're very likely to pick the first slice. You're likely to get the first students, because kindergarten kids don't travel more than 20 minutes. 20 to 25 minutes. Primary school kids don't travel more than 45 minutes. Secondary school kids shouldn't travel more than an hour. So do a concentric circle. What's the community around there? That's your. So if you have absolutely no brand, and that's a community, you will get the first group in, right? Now, to answer your question, if you put your school next to another school, then it all comes down to the power of your brand. What's your value proposition? What exactly are you delivering? And I sad to say, in Indonesia, it's also pricing, right? It also has to be the right price. So how long does it take for you to ramp up? You should be seeing a nice ramp up on EBITDA positive in at least 4 years, 3 to 4 years. That's where the schools typically start looking nice. And once you go past the 3rd year, you should be seeing 80–90% capacity if you're running it well by the 5th, maybe the 6th year. So that's my take. So it's always what I call the 3+3, 3 to break even and 3 to be nicely sitting. So that's the plan you need to have. I hope that makes sense.
Definitely, and that's the general observation in the market gestation period for a new school of 3 to 5 years. But of course, all schools gestate differently, right? As you mentioned, at different sectors and price points. So the next question, do you think the PropCo-OpCo structures can work in emerging markets?
Yeah, I think that's the best structure to have. I think if you're a school operator, then see, there are two kinds of school operators, right? Real estate developers who have the real estate. So they don't worry, they own their own land, they put on their own building. People like me, I'm a school operator. So what happens in place for us, we look for the PropCo-OpCo structure, meaning I lease it from someone, he's the PropCo, and I am running the school, I'm the OpCo. But there is, if you can, you may want to take a small equity in the PropCo, even if it's a 5 to 10%. I think it adds stability. You won't have landlords flexing muscles if you can. That will be a good stable thing to have. So yeah, so I think PropCo-OpCo structures are something that schools should look towards.
And generally in Indonesia, it's pretty accepted structure now, and there's a lot of schools even looking at it now.
And I also say something, when you put these structures in place, your jurisdiction is very important, right? You can't ask investors to invest in you when there is no rule of law. So so Indonesia is a great place to be. Singapore is another one to put your investments there, and then also to look at auditors, financial auditors to help you, to work with you. And there are a lot. So happy to recommend some great auditors. In fact, one or two are online listening to this.
Okay, last question, but they're still coming in. But let's wrap it up.
It's okay. I'm happy. I'm having a great time.
Okay. Well, I hope you are after this question. You kind of answered it earlier without naming any names, but it's been in the public domain, so I think it's pretty relevant. You can choose to answer or not. Was Jaspal disappointed with how things turned out with Abraj?
Yeah, I was.
Perhaps for everyone, you might want to explain that who Abraj was.
So Abraj is a private equity that I approached. They invested in my fund, and then there was supposed to be two investments. One investment in the phase one, and there was supposed to be a follow-on investment. Very unfortunately, Abraj went into trouble, and there was no management on their side to deal with me. Some of you would say, "Oh, very good. No management, do your own thing, run your own business." I don't. If I take money from people, I need to interact with those investors. So we were kind of left in a limbo. But today we have actors, and they are part of the investment. And I think I am a very happy man today.
Good. Again, it's all about key learnings and how you can strengthen from those without getting too philosophical about it. Okay, if we got time for one more question. I think I can anticipate the answer, but you mentioned you're are about to go into growth mode now, acquisition mode. You're looking at aligned rather, and interested groups of schools in Indonesia and the region. In terms of the market, that's pretty limited in terms of groups of schools now. What's available? There's a question that's come through. Would you be interested in looking at single site operations? And if so, what kind of metrics would you be considering in terms of occupancy, EBITDA, price point?
So first, in terms of timing, by the way, if you're listening in, just tell me what you feel about this talk. Just give some feedback, and if you want me to cover something else, I'll be very happy the next time. I mean, just tell me if you're happy or not. I just don't want to waste people's time. So moving into your question, we are currently in a pandemic situation. Right now, it's maintaining, it's ensuring that things run well. Next year, I will be raising funds to get into I will be in an acquisition phase. So it usually takes about a year to close a deal. So this and next year is a time to what I call talk, get to know each other. Let's find out what your business is. Where do you want to be? Will I take a single school? I think it's not a question of whether I'll take a single school or 2 schools or 3 schools. I want to take a school or partner a school which has the right philosophy. I will not touch a school which is, you may be 3 schools or 5 schools, but your philosophy is different from mine. I will not transact. But if you're one school and you believe in the well-being of your teachers, you have a program that's running well, you need help and you're open and you want to be part of a bigger group, then I want to be talking to you. So I hope that answers the question. It goes back to, remember what I said, I don't want to talk about valuations. I want to talk about alignment of vision first before we talk about valuations.
Yeah, and I think that's the key to every transaction, particularly in education, where it's so emotionally charged. If you have to have that values alignment between all parties, and of course not just for the transaction itself, but for the growth of the school.
Yeah, but also, Alvin, you know that I'm talking to one school. We are not going anywhere because we know what the multiples for a single school is in the market. But when you apply to that school, I get feedback to say, hey, but my land and building is worth 5 times. And I say to everyone, if you want us to buy your land and building, then we are not the right group for you, because I'm not a real estate developer. But if the multiple works for a land and building, let's do that deal. But otherwise, we are a school operator. I don't speculate on land. And I think K-12 shouldn't speculate on land. K-12 should be focusing on the human asset, the teachers, the students, and not infrastructure assets and its valuation. I hope that makes sense.
No, definitely, and they're perhaps some of the key questions that school owners and operators should be asking anyone who knocks on their door, or anyone they approach with regards to any transaction. So just coming back to Jaspal's point about feedback, we take it super seriously. We'll be sharing a link now to a 30-second feedback form, the results of which obviously help us improve. We share with Jaspal. As he mentioned, he's a great believer in feedback, and he'll take that on board for further sessions. In terms of what we've learned today, I really, well, for one of the first times in a long time, I'm absolutely stuck to kind of boil it down to one definitive answer. There's so much there. I gave up taking notes after the first minute and a half. We could probably spend the rest of the afternoon catching up on other points relevant to the discussion. So thank you, Jaspal, so much. It's been incredibly insightful, as you can see from the chat. People, almost everyone's still online. There's still a few questions coming through.
Hopefully, maybe they have nothing to do, but okay.
People are thanking you already. So thank you, everyone. Next up in this series, we've heard from 2 operators in Indonesia and the region and the world who are scaling up very differently. Next one, it's over to the investors. We'll be looking at their motivations, why they want to get into K-12, how they see the future of investment, and of course the burning issue about patient capital. So thank you, everyone, again. We really appreciate it. Thanks for your time. And Jaspal, thank you, sir. Everyone be well.
Thank you to everyone. And look, we in K-12, this is a sector that we all need to work together. So reach out to me. We don't need to transact. It doesn't have to be a business, but if you have an issue that you think you can teach me, or if you can, or I can help you, I think a lot of people know me. I'm very willing to help. So God bless, be safe, and let's keep our students in mind in whatever else we do. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.